Mr. Speaker, it's an honour to rise in response to a question that I had on November the 2nd, which was the eve of the disastrous Korean-owned Hanjin Seattle spill, which saw 35 shipping containers insulated with styrofoam contaminate the coastline of the west coast of Vancouver Island. And to date, Mr. Speaker, I will note, the government has provided zero funding to clean up the spill, while the community-led initiatives and volunteers sprung into action that continue to donate hard-earned money and clean up the mess that was left on the west coast of Vancouver Island. And I do want to thank the groups that really led the charge: Ocean Legacy, Pacific Rim Chapter of Surfrider, Clayoquot Cleanup, the Tlaloquit Indigenous Guardians, the leaders in Tofino and Ucluelet, and the Nuu-Chah-Nulth leaders that called for support from Ottawa, which didn't happen. Mr. Speaker, during the year that we didn't get support on the west coast, the government indicated, and it took a year to get an answer from them, that there was a near-complete legislative and regulatory void for coastal debris cleanup and no dedicated fund. Mr. Speaker, when this incident took place, I came into the House of Commons, notified the government, called for support. The government didn't provide any support. Early in last year, in 2017, the Parliamentary Secretary at the time of Transport identified that the government's position was that they didn't feel that ocean plastics and marine debris posed an immediate threat to the environment. Mr. Speaker, we know that's ridiculous. And through debate, even today, as we debated the proposed Trans Mountain pipeline, it was really clear, hearing from members, that they don't understand how important the ocean is for us. Mr. Speaker, it's not just about the economy or the environment or our food security and recreation, because it is all of those to coastal people. It's our home. It's what connects us. It's our language, Mr. Speaker. It feeds us, and Mr. Speaker, we rely on it every day to sustain our communities and our sensitive ecosystems. Mr. Speaker, during the time that the government has shown no action, I've raised this concern in the House of Commons repeatedly. And the response I've been given is that the government has created a world-class ocean protection plan. Well, Mr. Speaker, what that looks like is it's invisible on the ground. We haven't had any support. Meanwhile, the government went to the United Nations, to the first World Summit on Oceans last June. They signed on to agreements to help tackle ocean plastics, which we know ocean plastics, if we keep going the way we're going, Mr. Speaker, will outweigh fish by 2050. We recently heard that they want to use the G7 to talk about ocean plastics and combating ocean plastics. Mr. Speaker, I've had questions directly to the Prime Minister, to parliamentary secretaries of the Environment, of Fisheries and Oceans, Transport, the Transport Minister. All of them, again, keep touting this world-class ocean protection plan. But when it comes to ocean plastics, we've seen nothing. What we'd like to see is a national strategy to combat plastic pollution in aquatic environments and create a permanent, dedicated annual fund to help clean up efforts like this in the future, Mr. Speaker. This was a serious incident that took place, and the Government of Canada was invisible. And, Mr. Speaker, we expect more. Everyone expects more, and certainly coastal people expect more. And I hope the government today will come forward with a solution that they're actually not going to leave our communities high and dry if an incident like this takes place again. Mr. Speaker, we're seeing global trade with Asia growing at a rate of 6% a year over the last 2 decades. And we've seen no supports on the ground for the impact of that marine highway is having on our sensitive ecosystems. I outlined how important the ocean is to us, Mr. Speaker. I hope that the member opposite will share a positive solution moving forward.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Transport.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank the honourable member for his question. And, you know, Mr. Speaker, with goods being shipped to and from Canada's coast, it is imperative that these products get to market in a safe and responsible way. And that's one reason behind why the government announced the Oceans Protection Plan, the $1.5 billion investment to ensure safe, clean and efficient marine transportation that protects marine environments and communities. This initiative will allow us to achieve a world-leading marine safety system that can respond to marine accidents that threaten Canada's oceans and waterways. It will allow us to further strengthen the Canadian Ship Source Oil Pollution Fund. Our government is also addressing the risk of other types of hazardous and noxious substances transported by ships and is adopting regulation as the final step towards Canada's ratification of the 2010 Hazardous and Noxious Substances Convention. Altogether, these measures will set Canada's regime as the international benchmark for a robust polluter-pay ship source pollution liability and compensation regime. The safety and protection of our waterways and shorelines and the many people who make use of them are at the heart of these regulations. Canadians, as well as visitors, enjoy our coasts and waterways for a variety of purposes, and we have a duty to ensure that they are protected. Our government will continue working with the marine stakeholders, Indigenous groups, and coastal communities to implement the various measures in the Oceans Protection Plan. Indigenous and coastal communities will have many opportunities to participate in responsible shipping. They will contribute to and have access to information on marine shipping activities and will also be offered training and have the opportunity to participate in search and rescue missions, environmental monitoring, and emergency spill response. It's through the participation from marine stakeholders, Indigenous groups, and coastal communities that our Ocean Protection Plan will succeed and our coast and waters will be preserved for future generations. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Courtenay-Alberni.
Mr. Speaker, the Ocean Protection Plan doesn't even mention ocean plastic anywhere in its document or any measures of how they're going to tackle it. In fact, the Government of Canada didn't do anything when the spill happened. In fact, the local community in Pacific Rim National Park, quick-thinking staff, appealed to the bankruptcy court, and the bankruptcy court got $72,000, which came to Ottawa, and in fact, Mr. Speaker, that money sat in Ottawa for 5 months, not in the hands of coastal people that were doing the hard work cleaning it up. This government failed coastal people, and today there's no answers to how they're going to amend their Ocean Protection Plan to tackle ocean plastics. We put forward a strategy, a clear strategy to talk about plastic debris discharge, how to limit reduction of microplastics entering our environment, and a permanent dedicated and annual fund, which is necessary, not just ongoing, but especially if there's emergency. Right now, the government has provided no answers again today, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Transport.
Mr. Speaker, this government takes safety and security and the protection of life and the marine environment as our key priorities. And that's been the core of various initiatives announced through the Oceans Protection Plan. Parks Canada has been involved in this cleanup. Funding was provided by the Hanjin as part of the debris cleanup. Those funds were provided to Parks Canada Pacific Rim National Park Reserve. And I would like to add my thank you to all of the groups who helped make a difference. Moving forward, our measures are, as part of the Ocean Protection Plan, will set Canada's regime as the international benchmark for a robust polluter-pay ship source, pollution liability and compensation regime. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.